My name is Selena Harper, and what I'm about to share with you changed my life forever. I've worked in Hollywood for over a decade, covering entertainment as a journalist. It was a job I once considered my dream, a chance to rub shoulders with celebrities and attend events most people could only dream of. But after what happened to me on January 5th, 2024, I realized how blind I had been. That night, I experienced a near-death experience, or NDE, that opened my eyes to the deeper realities of life, death, and the spiritual battle taking place right under our noses. Jesus himself showed me the truth about Hollywood, the way it influences the world, mocks God, and desensitizes people to sin. Sharing this testimony isn't easy, but it's something I know I must do. This isn't about condemnation. It's about awareness. It's about opening our eyes to the truth and turning back to God before it's too late. It was a typical night in Los Angeles. Bright city lights, luxury cars on the streets, and people dressed in their best, heading to some event or party. For me, it was the culmination of another exciting award season. That evening, I had just wrapped up coverage of the 82nd Golden Globe Awards. I spent the night interviewing celebrities, snapping photos, and reporting on the winners and their speeches. It was the kind of work I had dreamed of when I first moved to LA, and I loved every second of it. Or at least I thought I did. Looking back now, I realized something was different about that night. The jokes and comments during the event weren't just lighthearted humor, they felt like open mockery of God. I remember sitting in the press box, listening as one celebrity after another made jokes about religion, faith, and even Jesus himself. I didn't think much of it at the time. I'd grown up in a Christian home, but after years in Hollywood, I drifted from my faith. The irreverence and cynicism of the industry had dulled my sensitivity to things that would have once made me uncomfortable. That night, I brushed it off as just comedy. After the event, I left the Beverly Hilton, exhausted but content. My drive home took me through the winding hills of Mulholland Drive, a route I'd driven countless times before. The city lights sparkled below me, a sea of golden dots stretching as far as the eye could see. As I drove, I reflected on the night, the dresses, the speeches, the laughs. But beneath my satisfaction, I felt an uneasiness I couldn't quite shake. A thought kept nagging at me. Why is God always the punchline? Why does mocking faith seem so normal here? I tried to push the thought away, but it lingered. I glanced at the clock on my dashboard. 11:18 p.m. The road was quiet, and the hum of my car's engine was almost hypnotic. Then it happened. Out of nowhere, a sharp pain shot through my chest. It was so sudden and intense that I gasped, gripping the steering wheel as my vision blurred. My heartbeat felt irregular, pounding in my ears like a drum. I struggled to catch my breath, my hands shaking uncontrollably. The world around me seemed to spin, and I felt my grip on the steering wheel slipping. My car swerved to the side, the tires screeching as it veered off the road. I remember hearing the sound of the guardrail crumpling, followed by a deafening crash. Then silence. I later learned that I had suffered a sudden cardiac arrest, something the doctors referred to as a widowmaker. My heart stopped for 9 minutes and 27 seconds, and by all medical accounts, I should not have survived. But during those 9 minutes, I wasn't in my car. I wasn't even in this world. The transition was instantaneous. One moment, I was surrounded by the chaos of the crash. The next, I was standing in a place of indescribable beauty. It was as though I had been plucked out of time and space and placed into a realm more real than anything I had ever known. The first thing I noticed was the light. It wasn't like sunlight or artificial light. It was alive. It pulsed with warmth and love, wrapping around me in a way that made me feel completely safe. Every fear, every pain, every worry melted away in its presence. I looked down at myself and realized I wasn't in my physical body anymore. I wasn't bound by the heaviness of flesh or bone. Instead, I felt weightless, free, and more alive than I had ever been. As I stood there, taking in the beauty of this heavenly realm, I felt a presence behind me. It was powerful and unmistakable. When I turned, I saw him, Jesus Christ. There are no words to fully describe what it's like to be in the presence of Jesus. He radiated love, peace, and authority all at once. His eyes held a depth of understanding that made me feel completely seen, as if he knew every part of me, my joys, my sorrows, my mistakes, and loved me anyway. "Selena," he said, his voice gentle but filled with authority, "there is something I need to show you." In an instant, the serene beauty around me shifted. Jesus brought me to a place where I could see the earth, as if we were looking down at it from above. But this wasn't the earth as I had known it. It was a spiritual view of the world, one that revealed the forces at work behind the scenes. Jesus pointed to Hollywood, and suddenly I could see it in a way I never had before. I saw the entertainment industry as a massive influence, stretching its reach across nations, cultures, and generations. But what struck me most was how much spiritual power it carried, power that was being used to lead people away from God. Jesus revealed to me how Hollywood had become a tool for the enemy. I saw how its messages, jokes, and stories were subtly shaping people's hearts and minds, desensitizing them to sin and hardening them to God's truth. Then Jesus showed me the consequences of Hollywood's influence. I saw families being torn apart, children losing their innocence, and people chasing after fame, beauty, and material success instead of seeking God. I saw how entertainment was being used to distract people from their pain, their purpose, and ultimately their Creator. Movies, TV shows, and music weren't just entertainment. They were spiritual weapons, shaping culture and steering people's hearts away from the truth. Every word, every image carries weight, Jesus said. What is created and released into the world has the power to build or destroy. As Jesus continued to show me what was happening in Hollywood, I felt an overwhelming sense of sorrow. It wasn't just about the content itself. It was about the way it influenced millions of people who consumed it daily, often without questioning its impact on their hearts and minds. He showed me scenes of people sitting in their homes, glued to their screens. Parents were letting TV shows raise their children. not realizing the subtle messages being woven into their favorite movies and cartoons. Teenagers were being bombarded with distorted ideas about identity, success, and love, all wrapped in the guise of entertainment. I saw how society had come to normalize sin, how things that would have once shocked and offended people were now celebrated and embraced. Hollywood was feeding this shift, subtly conditioning people to accept things that went against God's truth. "Selena," Jesus said, his voice filled with both love and urgency, "Hollywood does not mock me out of ignorance. It mocks me because it serves a greater purpose for the enemy. He uses entertainment to desensitize hearts, to distort truth, and to lead people away from me." I felt tears streaming down my face as I listened. Jesus' words carried such weight, and yet there was no anger in his tone. Instead, there was sadness, a deep sorrow for how far humanity had drifted from him. But then he spoke words that filled me with hope. "My light will always shine in the darkness, and the darkness will never overcome it." There are still many who hunger for the truth, who are seeking me even now. They need to hear my voice. Then Jesus allowed me to see the spiritual battle taking place behind the scenes of the entertainment industry. What looked like harmless jokes and stories on the surface were actually weapons in a much larger war, a war for the hearts and souls of humanity. I saw dark forces working behind the scenes, whispering ideas into the ears of writers, producers, and creators. These forces didn't appear as monsters or demons. They were subtle, seductive, and persuasive, planting seeds of deception that would grow into full-blown lies. But I also saw something else, something beautiful. Scattered throughout Hollywood were small pockets of light. These were the believers, the Christians working in the industry who were striving to make a difference. They were often overlooked and outnumbered, but their presence was powerful. Their prayers were like flames that pushed back against the darkness, creating pockets of hope and truth. Jesus then showed me what could happen if people turned back to him. I saw families coming together in prayer, parents choosing to guide their children with God's truth instead of allowing Hollywood to shape their values. I saw filmmakers and creators using their talents to glorify God, producing content that uplifted and inspired rather than tore people down. "It's not too late," Jesus said. "There is still hope, but my people must wake up. They must recognize the battle and choose to stand for truth." As the vision began to fade, I felt an overwhelming sense of purpose. I didn't want to leave the peace and love of Jesus' presence, but I knew I had been given a mission. Jesus placed his hand on my shoulder and looked at me with a gaze that pierced straight into my soul. "Selena, your time here is not finished. Go back and tell them what you have seen. Warn them and remind them that I am with them always." In an instant, I felt myself being pulled back into my body. The warmth and light of heaven were replaced by the cold, harsh reality of the hospital room. When I opened my eyes, I was surrounded by doctors and nurses. Their faces were a mix of shock and relief. One of them leaned over me and said, "You're a miracle. We thought we lost you." I was weak, my body battered from the crash, but my spirit felt stronger than ever. I knew without a doubt that God had brought me back for a reason. Over the next few days, as I recovered, the memories of what I had seen remained vivid in my mind. Every detail, every word Jesus spoke, was etched into my soul. I couldn't stop thinking about the vision of Hollywood, the spiritual battle, and the call to action he had given me. After I was discharged from the hospital, I knew my life could never go back to the way it was. I couldn't just return to covering red carpets and interviewing celebrities as if nothing had happened. God had opened my eyes to the truth, and I felt a deep responsibility to share it with others. I started by telling my family and close friends. Their reactions were mixed. Some were moved to tears, while others seemed skeptical. But I didn't let that discourage me. I knew that this message wasn't mine to keep. It was something God had entrusted me with. Eventually, I began sharing my testimony publicly. I spoke at churches, community events, and anywhere else I was invited. Each time, I prayed that God would use my story to reach the hearts of those who needed to hear it. If there's one thing I want people to take away from my testimony, it's this: Hollywood isn't just a source of entertainment. It's a tool that the enemy is using to shape culture, desensitize hearts, and lead people away from God. But there is hope. Jesus is calling each of us to open our eyes, to recognize the battle we're in, and to stand firm in His truth. He's calling us to seek Him, to pray, and to use our influence, no matter how big or small, to shine His light in a world that desperately needs it. If my story has touched your heart, I encourage you to take a moment to reflect. What are you allowing into your heart and mind? Are you seeking God's truth? Or are you being influenced by the messages of the world? Jesus is waiting for you with open arms, ready to guide you, strengthen you, and fill your life with His peace and purpose. All you have to do is seek Him. Please share this video with others, like and subscribe to this channel, and leave a comment about how God has been working in your life. Together, we can shine His light and bring hope to a world in need.